Hello and welcome to a live popped culture on Deprogram with Keri Smith. I'm one of your hosts, Keri, and I'm here with my co-host, Mystery Chris. How are you, sir?
Good. How you doing, Keri?
I'm okay. Little slow in the brain today.
One of those days.
One of those days I feel like I should have just, I don't know, I need to sleep more or something. You know, when you wake up and you're just like, I mean, I had my coffee and everything, but it's still like, like.
Yep. Know the feeling.
Anyway, I'm still 6 feet above ground, as my papa used to say. So, you guys are watching, if you're here, you're watching a live pop culture, which is a show that we do on Wednesday nights to bring a little bit of levity and frivolity. We usually talk about pop culture items, and tonight we're talking about. You want to set it up?
We are talking about architecture and what went wrong, in our opinion.
What went wrong? We are two amateurs who are going to be talking about, or not, that's not even the correct word. We're just laymen. We're the common man. We're just going to talk about it from that perspective. We're not architects, much like when we talked about music. We're not music experts. We had a doctor of music on for that episode, which, by the way, if you didn't get to see that one was one of the most fun I think we've done. We and owing all to the music that we played and got to enjoy together. But because of that music, because of the clips, it got taken down from YouTube, and it was called Why Music Sucks Now. You can still listen to that one if you'd like to go and go through music history with us by listening and just having fun. That one is still up on Rumble. So I know Amy's here. Maybe she can drop the link to the Rumble channel in the chat. But that one's still on Rumble. It's just not on YouTube. So, oh, look, great encouragement. Thank you. Don't need to be a pro to know that modern architecture is awful.
Makes me feel bad. That's what I know.
Yeah. And then the music stream was great, but there should be many more. Yeah, I know. We could have broken that one down by decade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Alan says, I'm a pro at being an amateur. That's my opinion. That's what I am. Can you hear that noise?
No, I can't.
Okay. My friend was working on the shower today, tiling, and he's out there cleaning all the equipment and stuff. So I can hear it, but as long as it's just bothering me. I wanted to start off with something not related to our topic, just to get us in a fun mood. And you said I could do this, right, Chris?
Well, I mean, depends on what you show. If it's good, yes. If it's not good, then I do not say.
So sometimes to relax, I like repetitive music in the background. If I'm working, if I'm writing or something, I can listen to a song on repeat and for a long time. But that seems to annoy other people. But one of the songs I put on, I found a 10-hour loop of the saxophone part from Careless Whisper. which I put it on the other night, and I saxophoned Anthony right out of the room. He finally left. He was like, I can't take this. Anyway, I had never seen this before, but people shared this with me, and
Sexy Sex Man, yeah.
You know this?
Yeah.
It's so funny. I can't tell you how many times I've watched this. So, you guys, we're just going to open the show. It has nothing to do with tonight's topic of architecture. We're going to start it off with the sexy sax man, though, in case you haven't seen this guy. Here we go. Okay, you get the idea. It's more of that. It's more of that. My favorite is when he gets up on the counters and there's one where he's at a Ross store and she's like, "Sir, you're gonna have to leave." And instead of leaving, he gets up on the counter and just starts playing more, and she can't help herself. She starts laughing. I think just to be that guy's assistant for the day and travel around while he plays that saxophone part in different public
Well,
places would be a lot of fun.
he was influenced by. Do you ever see the movie The Lost Boys?
Yeah, a long time ago. The
There's a
vampire movie?
beginning of it where there's a really built guy with a shirt off. He's playing the saxophone. Tim, I forget his last name, but yeah, it's kind of taken from there.
Oh, I don't remember that part. I guess I have to rewatch The Lost
Yeah,
Boys.
you're gonna
Is
have.
it really taken from there?
Yeah, taking a shirt off, playing the saxophone. Yeah,
Well, well, thank
but
you
it's not
guys.
like a movie. And the movie's like serious about
Amy, what the heck is this? Does she want me to quit?
it.
Amy, the mod guys, two sisters and some yarn. You didn't enjoy that?
Are kind of sax. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Okay, so now let's get into the exciting topic of architecture.
Yeah, sexy
Okay.
architecture.
We're gonna make it fun. We're gonna learn a little bit tonight and try and make it fun as
Yeah,
well.
learning's fun.
I'll warn you, Mystery Chris. When I hear this is one of those words when I hear it, I tend to get a little like, mm, uh, but when I started reading about it and some of the stuff you were sending me, it is there's a lot of interesting stuff about it and about how it's influenced by culture and society, which makes sense.
Mhm.
What's going on in culture, uh, and even has to do with politics sometimes, which is strange.
Yeah, it's like all
So
connected. I've always been had an interest in architecture, and just kind of studied on my own. And it's only recently, in recent months, really, that I really started learning about the more ideological motivations of some of the architects who are responsible for turning architecture to what it is today. And I was just fascinated because the history books just leave it out. They don't really go into detail, the more utopian aspects of their thinking and where they went wrong. So I'm excited to talk about
cool. Okay, I'm gonna let you walk me through some of the worst of it. But so
it.
before we get into what we think, it's almost like with our music episode where we had so much fun looking at all the music leading up to the 1990s, and then once we got to the 90s, we were like, "Bleh," you know. So this is similar, except we're gonna do the opposite. We're not gonna spend as much time on all the different styles leading up to the yucky stuff. We're just gonna get into some of the yucky stuff. How about that?
That's
Um,
good.
we will give a brief overview though. So I found this article. I just thought it was a great, handy little reference point for the timeline of prominent architectural styles. This is on a website called thinkingthefuture.com. And it's great to use for this episode because they just have a little brief paragraph on each one and a photo to give you an idea of what it is. So at the beginning, it's talking about, how architecture is influenced by society. Um, and culture. And then we're going to go through the top 10 in order. So the classical style was from the 7th to the 4th century BC. And it says this refers to the style that was predominantly used in ancient Greece and Rome between the 7th century and 4th century BC. Great buildings were constructed during this period. The most remarkable one to have ever been built in the Parthenon, a Greek temple constructed for Athena. Classic architecture is known for its symmetry, order, proportion, and perspective, surrounded by three classical orders. If you scroll down, you can see obviously a couple of examples of classical. I got to go to the Colosseum.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What was your impression of it?
I was just awestruck. I wasn't supposed to go. I was in Italy for a friend's wedding, and there was a when we were trying to leave, there was some kind of system-wide, international system-wide shutdown of British and American Airlines. So we were stuck in Rome for an extra few days. Stuck in Rome, right? Like that's
When
awful.
in Rome, literally when in Rome.
When in Rome, yeah, and I got to see all these places I didn't think there was gonna be time to even see. It just I think the word that comes to mind is awe.
Mhm.
People use that word awesome all the time to mean things that are not actually awesome, and This was awesome. You
Did,
just
did you go in there and go, "Are you not entertained?"
no, I
No,
haven't seen that movie.
what?
I know what it's from, but I haven't seen that.
What?
Yeah.
There.
Uh anyway, it left you just feeling kind of it puts your place in history in perspective. How about that? Like
Mm.
looking up at the vastness of the sky. This is so old, you can't even put words to it. It's just
Yeah.
kind of it makes you feel how small you are, not in a bad way.
It's just amazing what, the Romans were able to do with such primitive by, compared to what we have now, the technology and the fact that a lot of it, still stands. It is awe-inspiring.
Mhm. So then we're going to move again. We're going to try to move quickly through these to get to the awful ones. Romanesque architecture. So from 1050 to 1170 AD, the architectural style of medieval Europe, characterized by thick, heavy piers, narrow windows, stained glass, semicircular arches, and towers. Um, they're talking about churches and castles during this period, and then they have a couple of examples here from France. Different cathedrals. Okay, that's Rome. That's what was that one? Romanesque. So then we're gonna get to. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Gothic architecture. So this was from 1100 to 1450 AD. Um, the late Middle Ages in France. Um, let's see. Okay, here we go. Distinguished by its flying buttresses and pointed arches that allowed for the high vaulted ceilings that Gothic architecture is known for. The interiors of the buildings were lighted up with stained glass windows, gables, colorful tapestries, trestle tables. All these decorative elements led to a more graceful architecture. They're talking about Notre Dame. Here we go. I mean, as a layman, I don't have a lot of descriptive words for this other than beautiful. I love it.
I wonder how the roof's coming. You remember when it somehow caught on fire? Like, was it 3
Mhm.
or 4 years ago? Maybe longer, I forget, but
I remember people were saying they were going to, instead of rebuilding, replace it with something postmodern or modern, which is just awful.
or
Okay,
McDonald's.
yeah. So then we move into Renaissance architecture. This style is characterized for its perfection, focusing on symmetry, geometry, proportion, orderly arrangement of columns, formal landscape gardens, the use of arched openings, hemispherical domes, vaulted ceilings, and stone flooring. Then they talk about the Florence Cathedral. Well, yeah, there's a picture of it there. Again, gorgeous. Okay. We're speeding through these guys. That's what we're doing. Baroque architecture says this took a more dramatic approach to Renaissance architecture, driven by playfulness rather than rationalism. It says this architecture portrays irregular shapes, exaggerated ornamentation, opulent paintings, and bold contrast. The style features elements like domes, central towers, colonnades, portico, and highly decorated interior details that leave a lasting effect on the viewer. And they're talking about the Palace of Versailles, just so ornate, over the top, opulent. Okay, then neoclassical, and they go through some pictures of the White House in Washington, D.C.
No blurb about January 6th on there.
Nothing on there
This
about
famous building was stormed by neo-Nazis.
neoclassical. Then Art Deco. Art Deco is at least something I'm a little more familiar with because I have some pieces of furniture that you would call Art Deco. They use the chevron a lot, that V.
Mhm.
My grandparents' original bedroom suite is from the 1940s, and it was from that Art Deco style where you would see that chevron on a lot of the furniture. It says so. This was in 1925. It says it emerged in the 20s and 30s, promoting the industrial arts. The movement represents social and technological progress combined with the use of luxurious materials, patterns, handcrafted elements, and icons with modern technology and design. When I think of this style, I think of the 1920s and flappers and um, what was that TV show that used a lot of Art Deco? American Horror Story.
Mhm.
Did you ever see
No, I
the
didn't see that.
season that took place in a hotel, and it was
Mhm.
really that Art Deco style? Um, I like this style. And this confuses me, Mystery Chris, because this was like 20s and 30s, but then they get into where we're about to start. This is what we're all leading up to, modernism. And
No.
so
Boy.
so you had this Art Deco style that was happening at the same time as modernism and architecture was being born. And it says modern architecture emerged in the first half of the 20th century, which brought a dramatic change both for art and architecture. Modernism encompasses various different styles that emphasize functionalism, purified architectural form, clean structure, lack of ornamentation, and use of new age materials, steel, glass, and concrete. It's a lot of concrete. It is
Yeah,
a
especially
lot
when you
of
get to,
concrete.
brutalism. Yep.
Yeah. Modernism is viewed as an important shift in terms of architectural design and expression. The term form follows function redefined a new world of architecture that signifies and sustains to motivate architects today. The great architects that flourished during this era include Frank Lloyd Wright, Louis Sullivan, um, then this guy, Le Corbusier, who we're going to spend a little bit of time on. And I believe you're going to call him, what were you calling him?
Le Corb.
Oh, Le Corb. Do you want to tell us about him?
Yeah, so Le Corb was originally a Swiss man who got a French citizenship in the 1920s, changed his name to Corbusier, and decided to try to develop a whole new style of architecture that essentially did away with the past. It just ignored past because, as we were just seeing with architecture prior to the 1920s, most of the architecture was just building on what came before and kind of push things in slightly new directions, or maybe it might call back to some older styles. But
But
it
it was building, like you said,
yes,
like Baroque was building on the Renaissance, which was building
right.
on Gothic, etc.
So yeah, so Le Corbe and the Bauhaus school, which was a school in Germany from 1919 to 1933, which had to close because Hitler started arresting people for trying to be subversive. Hmm. Uh, but they decided they wanted to, like I said earlier, do away with everything that came previously and build a whole new style of architecture, one that would be um, something that's fit for the working class, something that would be cheap, easily be mass produced. Le Corb had a idea of building these buildings for the poor working class that would be anti bougie. The whole architects, who are part of the New International Style, were against whatever they defined as being bougie, which was basically ornamentation, because ornamentation buildings, a lot of the older ones were done by hand, and they tend to thought that that was cost a lot of money. Therefore, it was something a product of the wealthy. So they wanted to make something that the working man would embrace, which they didn't. And the irony is that even though they said they were anti-elitist, they really became elitist. They started designing for themselves, and this kind of marks
Yes.
the period where we start seeing architects in general start to design for themselves and not design with consideration for the environment in which they're placing a building in. They don't consider the history and the people, and it's basically the global homo type thing, where they want a homogenous style of architecture that will be used globally, where
Yeah.
everything will look the same, and there will be no there you won't be able to tell a difference between who has more money and who doesn't, because everything is equal.
Yes. Well, it actually makes me think of some of the totalitarian, leaders throughout history who said they were thinking of the common man, and they were moving ideology forward, this collectivist ideology forward, so that the lower oppressed classes would benefit. But in the end, they were serving themselves,
Yeah.
which is similar to this. I was reading one of the pieces you sent me about Le Corbusier, Le Corb, and in it, it was talking about well, I know we're going to hit on some parts of this article, but one of the things that really struck me is how they said that there was this video of him, and he's got a map of Paris, and he's
Mhm.
taking a black crayon and just gleefully
Yeah.
just drawing through all that, and he's like, you basically need to raise the city to the ground and start over. He said the same thing about New York City.
Mhm.
It's like you just need to get rid of all of this and start. He really wanted that year zero, like everything before me is gone and everything begins with me in terms of architecture and
Exactly.
city planning.
Yep. Yeah. He was a technocrat, really. I mean, this utopian vision, which really is fundamentally a left wing kind of view, was something that he and other architects at the time had, and so he was trying to centrally plan for the cities of the future, and he was doing it without consideration of actual people.
Yeah. And there was another part of that article that stood out to me. Oh, to your point about how in the end they said they were doing all this design for the working class and the working man, right? But in the end, they became very elite, and that was borne out in one of the pieces you sent me, where it talked about his writings and his journals, and how they were hard to decipher. That he would kind of jump all over the place, like flight of thought in his writing, and then he would include pictures and drawings and things that didn't seem to have anything to do with what he was talking about. But if you go and hear any architectural, like, design students, the ones who idolized him, the ones who studied under him, they would say things like, well, they would basically imply, well, you're just not smart enough to get it. Like, like,
Yes,
yeah.
it's the same thing with the art world, how insular it became, and then all these designers are designing for acclaim of other designers, and like we've been saying, it became very elitist.
Yeah. Should we pull up that piece about him, or should I found a video we might want to watch, just the beginning of, about him. Do you want to
Okay.
start with the
Yes.
video? Okay, let's do that. And I don't think you've seen this, so this will be fun. Can you see that?
There we go.
Cool.
If the idea of being a modern person and leading a modern life still has an exciting ring to it, it's at least in part down to the influence of an extraordinary Swiss architect, Le Corbusier, who in the first half of the 20th century wrote books, put up buildings, and designed bits of furniture that all conveyed the excitement, sleekness, and glamour of the modern technological world. Le Corbusier began his career by attacking the architecture of the Victorian age and contrasting it with what he saw as the
What's going on in there?
I forgot what parts I wanted to pause at. That was one of them. I'm just like, he didn't like the architecture of the Victorian age, maybe because of what's happening through the window. What is that?
The architecture made men very
Okay.
and contrasting it with what he saw as the beauty and intelligence of modern engineering. Our engineers are healthy and virile, active and useful, balanced and happy in their work, he exclaimed in his famous polemical book, Towards a New Architecture, written in 1923. Meanwhile, Le Corbusier added, our architects are disillusioned and unemployed, boastful or peevish. This is because there will soon be nothing for them to do. We no longer have the money to erect historical souvenirs. At the same time,
Okay, that part I wanted to pause on. Historical souvenirs. That's what he calls all of this artistry.
Yeah. No appreciation for the beauty, for the like you said, the artistry, the handcrafted elements of architecture. Just no appreciation of it.
And how much time and the craftsmanship involved, and just to throw it in the dustbin of an art, like a historical souvenir. It's no better than a trinket that you pick up. Like,
Giant
I
snow.
just the ego on this man. Okay.
time, everyone needs to wash. Our engineers provide for these things, and they will be our builders. Le Corbusier recommended that the houses of the future be ascetic and clean, disciplined and
Ugh.
frugal. His hatred of any kind of decoration extended to a pity of the British royal family and the ornate golden carriage in
He would hate this because this is beautiful and opulent. Okay.
which they travelled to open Parliament in every year. He suggested that they push the carved monstrosity off the cliffs of Dover.
Okay. I do not like this guy. I'm gonna skip ahead. So it talks about how he thought somebody asked him what was his favorite chair, and he gave some answer that reminds me of that guy in class who tries to show how smart he is and so different and smarter than everyone else. And he's like, my favorite chair is the seat in an airplane. Like, shut up. And he says because the airplane because of efficiency, you remove all ornamentation and all decoration. It's just completely functional, and that's his favorite chair. Okay, dude. So it goes on to some of the different houses that he built. And this video actually, this is from a channel called The School of Life. They actually compliment some of his designs of small homes, which I don't exactly like, but I will grant them that there's some interesting parts of the design that he was doing for homes. But then they talk about this part here, the disaster of his city planning. Here we go.
Architecture. Le Corbusier was evidently one of the world's greatest architects, but he was also one of the world's most disastrous urban designers. His manifesto on how to make cities, contained in 2 books, The City of Tomorrow and Its Planning, written in 1925, and The Radiant City of 1933, called for a dramatic break from the past. The existing city centres must all come down. To save itself, every great city must rebuild its centre. Le Corbusier wanted ever taller towers, some housing as many as 40,000 people. When he visited New York for the first time, he came away disappointed by the relatively small scale of the buildings. Your skyscrapers are too low, he told a surprised journalist. By building upwards, 2 problems would be resolved at a stroke: overcrowding and urban sprawl. Le Corbusier planned to abolish city streets. In his vision of the future, people would have footpaths all to themselves, while cars would enjoy massive, dedicated motorways with smooth, curving interchanges. Even more than Paris, New York was for Le Corbusier the epitome of an illogical city because it had managed to graft skyscrapers, the buildings of the future, onto a tight street plan better suited to a medieval settlement. On his trip around the United States, he advised his increasingly bemused American hosts that Manhattan ought to be demolished to make way for a fresh and more Cartesian attempt at urban design.
Again, the ego on this guy. You should bring the city down and build these monstrosities, okay?
I mean, doesn't it remind you of a lot of people who are kind of pushing like sustainability and the whole Agenda 21 that became Agenda 2030, which became the Great Reset? It's like,
Yes.
let's herd people in cities and put them in coffin-sized apartments and give them give up their
Yes.
cars.
40,000 people he wanted in one apartment building.
Yep.
And this looks like something from the movie Alien. I mean,
It's from that movie with Loki guy. I saw that. High Rise, I think it's called. It was disappointing, but meh.
So I'm going to skip ahead again, this time to the end, and they're going to talk about his legacy when it came to designing cities and what's left of some of these skyscraper towns that he created in France. So here they are complimenting. This is a picture of one of his homes that they're complimenting, and then they're going to...
Some of the great cities of Europe and the United States. For a man whose ambition was to change the world, we can revere him paradoxically for the most modest things about him: his beautiful whitewashed villas, his door handles,
Okay.
and his arm.
His door handles. By the way, I hate that door handle. What is... No, there's nothing beautiful about that door handle.
It is the door handle of the working man.
I like the old ones with the crystal, the big crystal knob, or the skeleton key. Like, what is... Anyway. Okay, so here I think I didn't skip it entirely. Oh no, I did. I missed the part about his... where they're talking about his sorry guys. Let me go back just a little bit further.
Pressing that
Where he'd
interior.
gone for a swim. He was responsible for having built some of the most beautiful private houses of all time. But his ideas had also destroyed some of the great cities of Europe and the United States. For a man whose ambition was to change the world, we can revere him paradoxically for the most modest things about him: his beautiful whitewashed villas, his door handles, and his armchairs.
Oh, it was earlier. I skipped
To
over
take
it.
an overland train in historic Paris.
Okay, here we
onto
go.
a tight street plan better suited to a... On his trip around the United States, he advised his increasingly bemused American hosts that Manhattan ought to be demolished to make way for a fresh and more Cartesian attempt at urban design. Ironically, what Le Corbusier's dreams helped to generate were the dystopian housing estates that now ring historic Paris. The wastelands from which tourists avert their eyes in confused horror and disbelief on their way into the historic city. To take an overland train to the most violent and degraded of these places is to realize all that Le Corbusier forgot about architecture, and in a wider sense about human nature.
Look
For
at that.
example, he forgot how tricky it is when just a few of one's 2,699 neighbors decide to throw a party or buy a handgun. He forgot how drab reinforced concrete can seem under
Look at that.
a grey sky. He forgot how awkward it is when someone lights a fire in the lift shaft and home is on the 44th floor. When Le Corbusier died in 1965, having had a heart attack in the south of France, where he'd gone for a...
Okay, so we've seen.
But yeah, it wasn't just like Paris in the United States, where a lot of the projects were inspired by his architectural vision. And I think I sent you an article. There was a brief blurb in there about the architects who developed the urban housing and shoved a bunch of Black people in there. And well, it's going pretty well, as you can tell.
It's going pretty well.
Yes, just like he dreamed.
Okay. Should we bring up that piece, the one that's maybe the most disturbing about him?
Yeah, that gives a little more info about him.
Do you want to read the super chat while I bring it up?
Anyone who names their pitch the city of tomorrow should immediately be disqualified from designing tomorrow's city. So, city of tomorrow.
Thank you, Ian. So forth.
He was also not a fan of the Jews, so they're probably not any Jews in his futuristic city.
Really?
Yeah, he was a little fashy, a little socialisty. Yeah.
Okay. The architect as totalitarian. This is from the City Journal. And I pulled up the PDF version that you sent me because I think it's easier because you highlighted some of it. I'm going to read some of this if that's okay.
Mhm.
So this is from 2009. It says Le Corbusier was to architecture what Pol Pot was to social reform. In one sense, he had less excuse for his activities than Pol Pot, for unlike the Cambodian, he possessed great talent, even genius. Unfortunately, he turned his gifts to destructive ends, and it is no coincidence that he willingly served both Stalin and, I cannot say this word, I'm sorry.
Vichy.
I'm ignorant. Like Pol Pot, he wanted to start from year zero. Before me, nothing. After me, everything. By their very presence, the raw concrete clad rectangular towers that obsessed him canceled out centuries of architecture. Hardly any town or city in Britain, to take just one nation, has not had its composition wrecked by architects and planners inspired by his ideas. And then they talk about how when people write about him, they call him the most important architect of the 20th century. But then they point out, well, importance is one thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have merits. Like they would call Lenin one of the most important politicians of the 20th century as well. You didn't highlight it, but there was another part I wanted to read here. Oh, this was just great. So this guy who wrote this piece hates him. It's kind of great. And he went to this exhibition about him. And he says, I fell talking with two elegantly coiffed ladies of the kind who spend their afternoons in exhibitions. Marvelous, don't you think? One said to me, to which I replied, monstrous. Both opened their eyes wide as if I had denied Allah's existence in Mecca. And so he went on to talk to them. I just like that he threw in this little aside, this anecdote about just confronting the views that people have. And the women went on to bemoan some of the big concrete skyscraper monstrosities on the outskirts of where they live. And he was like, well, who do you think inspired those? It's this guy here. What was the other part here that you wanted me to read, Chris?
You highlighted.
Oh.
That there.
Okay. In fairness to Le Corbe, three extenuations can be offered for his life's appalling work. He came to maturity in an age when new industrial materials and methods made possible a completely different architecture from any previously known. The destruction in northern France during World War I, as well as social conditions generally, necessitated swift rebuilding on a large scale, a problem that no one else solved satisfactorily. And he had grown up at a time when bourgeois domestic clutter, heavy, elaborate gilt and plush furniture, knickknacks everywhere, was often so outrageous that an extreme revulsion against it in the form of militant bareness and absence of adornment was understandable, though not necessarily laudable. The diametrical opposite of an outrage is more likely itself to be an outrage than to be a solution to it. Nevertheless, Le Corbe's language reveals his disturbingly totalitarian mindset. For example, in what is probably his most influential book, the 1924 Towards a New Architecture, the very title suggests that the world had been waiting for him. He writes poetically, "We must create a mass production state of mind. A state of mind for building mass production housing, a state of mind for living in mass production housing, a state of mind for conceiving mass production housing." Who are these we of whom he speaks so airily, responsible for creating, among other things, universal states of mind? Only one answer is possible. Le Corbe and his disciples, of whom there were, alas, to be many. Everyone else has, quote, eyes that do not see, as he so tolerantly puts it. You're right. This reminds me of what's happening right now with this push towards, 2030 and this globalism where people are sort of viewed more as cattle that need to be herded into, large apartment buildings that they don't own, riding on public transportation that they don't own.
Like we're like essentially ants, just cattle.
Eating bugs. Anyway. Do you want to read this part?
See, yeah. Le Corbe wanted architecture to be the same the world over because he believed that there was a correct way to build and that only he knew what it was. The program of the International Congress of Modern Architecture, which Le Corbe was the moving spirit, states reform are extended simultaneously to all cities, to all rural areas across the seas, no exceptions. Oslo, Moscow, Berlin, Paris, Algiers, Port Said, Rio, Buenos Aires, and the solution is the same. Le Corbe maintains, since it's the answer, the same needs. Le Corbe imperatives apply to more than building or even city planning, for he was nothing if not a totalitarian philosopher whose views on architecture derived, at least in part, from a self-opponently omnicompetent viewpoint. We must create forms, tools, machinery, and homes conducive to clean, healthy, well-ordered life. We must organize the village to fulfill its role at the center that will provide for the needs of the farm and act as a distributor of its products. We must kill off the old, voracious and ruthless kind of money and create new, honest money, a tool for fulfillment of a wholly normal, wholly natural function.
Okay, that's something else this guy mentioned earlier in this piece, which is that if you read his writings, the most constant word throughout is the word must.
Mm-hmm.
He uses the word must repeatedly. We must do this. We must do that. Like, and completely from that totalitarian mindset of, I know what's best for humanity. I know what's best for city planning.
Yeah.
And I've appointed myself.
It's that ego, and it only grows in architecture. From there on out. And
I'll read this part. A terminal inhumanity, what one might call almost ahumanity, characterizes Le Corbu's thought and writing, notwithstanding his declarations of fraternity with mankind. This manifests itself in several ways, including in his thousands of architectural photos and drawings, in which it is rare indeed that a human figure ever appears. Who's going to live in these beehives?
I was thinking, it's like, well, maybe he's not good at drawing humans. Maybe that's the reason why he's like.
And I don't think he really cares about the humans. And then always as a kind of distant aunt, unfortunately spoiling an otherwise immaculate Platonic townscape. Thanks to his high-rise buildings, Le Corbu says 95% of the city surface shall become parkland. And he then shows a picture of a wooded park without a single human figure present. Presumably, the humans will be where they should be, out of sight and out of mind, the architect's mind anyway, in their machines for living in, as he so charmingly termed houses, sitting on machines for sitting on, as he defined chairs. This ahumanity explains Le Corbu's often expressed hatred of streets and love of roads. Roads were impressive thoroughfares for rushing along at the highest possible speed. He had an obsession with fast cars and airplanes, which therefore had a defined purpose and gave rise to no disorderly human interactions. The street, by contrast, was unpredictable, incalculable, and deeply social. Le Corbu wanted to be to the city what pasteurization is to cheese.
Yeah. And that's basically all I had highlighted in that. I know you. Oh, I guess I did. I thought
You had one more part.
Never mind.
Did you want to read that part?
Yeah, it's a little blurry. Okay. His ahumanity makes itself evident also in his attitude toward the past. Repeatedly, he talks of the past as a tyranny from which it is necessary to escape, as if no one had discovered or known anything until his arrival. It is not that the past bequeaths us problems that we must try our best to overcome. It is the entire past, with few exceptions, is a dreadful mistake best destroyed and then forgotten. His disdain for his contemporaries, except those who went over to him without reserve, is total. But a stroll through the Parisian suburb of Venice, to take only one example, should have been enough to convince him or anybody else that right up to World War I, architects had been capable of building different from, but in harmony with, all that had gone before. These architects, however, were not mad egotists determined to obtrude their names permanently on the public, but men content to add their might to their civilization. And at no point does Le Corbu discuss the problem of harmonizing the new with what already exists.
That's exactly what we were talking about at the beginning. He had no desire to at all build upon the past or to harmonize and to appreciate what came before. It was just like complete destruction before him. And then his favorite material was reinforced concrete. Reinforced concrete, which breaks down over time and looks. We saw those pictures of those buildings and how awful they look decades later. Like, he just picked the ugliest design, the ugliest materials. Look at what he says about Gothic architecture. Right below this, you didn't highlight it, but look at what he says. Gothic architecture is not fundamentally based on spheres, cones, and cylinders. It is for that reason that a cathedral is not very beautiful. What? Oh, thanks for introducing me to this man that I
know.
This man from history that I can abhor.
Yeah, you know where it all starts. This crazy egotist.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna read real quick. I just want to read one paragraph. You don't have to pull this article up, but this was talking about the public housing. And so it says the public housing program in the 1950s United States combined these two elements of Le Corbu's design theories and environmental determinism. Quote, the belief that an ideal or improved residential environment will be better the behavior as well as the condition of its inhabitants. End quote. The Housing Act of 1949 created a public housing program which consisted of slum clearance and urban redevelopment in order to enable truly rational behavior, which was troublesome under the previously messy urban structures. Le Corbu's high-rises were chosen as the model style for the new residential building structures under the belief that providing a safe, clean housing structure would encourage lower-income people towards upward mobility. The housing was meant to diminish social ills by providing poor citizens with an affordable and decent place to live in the interest of social welfare. In reality, many Black Americans were forced into these structures for the sake of urban renewal and infrastructure projects. In contrast to its stated benevolent purpose, many of these buildings became havens of social decay and crime and were eventually razed or renovated. The structures designed in accordance with Le Corbusiers' principles were called architectural systems that reinforce structural racism. And the thing is, like, this isn't just a Black issue. This is something that certain interests want for everybody. Like we were saying earlier, they want us to live in these structures, put us all, because it's easier to control people.
Yeah. I just did a quick search for the projects so we can look at some of Le Corbusiers' beautiful legacy.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's just like straight up like communist country. When you look at those things, it's hard to believe it's America.
I can't believe they thought low-income this would make them want to achieve more, maybe because they wanted to get out of it. Like that would be the only, to get out of such dreary surroundings in architecture.
And there was like no input. There was like no discussions with the inhabitants of these buildings. It was just, we're designing this and we're going to put you in there and you're going to like it. You're going to own nothing and like living in the projects.
Yeah. It's just, when you come home, you want to be surrounded by beauty. Now, and beauty is subjective, obviously, and people are going to decorate in different ways and have, different style architecture homes or different kinds of apartments. But whatever it is you're aiming towards, that would be like your dream home. I just can't imagine anyone being like, this is at the top. Like, I want to be in the projects. Who wants, why does this guy get so much credit with designing such just dreary, inhuman kind of dwellings? I don't know.
You'll still find a lot of people defending, his work and, this belief that it was implemented incorrectly, that his ideas weren't done right, and that's what led to the urban decay of the projects in other places in Europe. But I don't think, regardless of how close to his initial view of what society to be was implemented in, America and the other places of the world, it was still destined to fail because, like we mentioned, it was mentioned in the article we read previously, that he did not take into account human nature. And that's ultimately the failing of it, and that's ultimately the failing of central planning in general.
Yeah. You're making me think of well, first let me read this. Frying Pants, what a great name. Thank you, Frying Pants gives us $10 super chat and says, "Hi Keri, love your channel. You helped me. I think you would find the film Architecture of Doom fascinating. It highlights the superficiality and folly of much of what drove Hitler's insanity." Have you seen that movie?
I have not.
Me either. I'm gonna write that down.
Kind of sounds like a Indiana Jones movie. Indiana Jones and the Architecture of Doom.
Le Corbusier. And
utopian society.
actually, Blah, I don't know if Blah went to architecture school or not, but Blah says, "Keri, just keep saying Le Corbusier. Everyone in an architecture school would know who you're talking about."
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, good. Alan says, "So he built slums," and people defend that.
Yes. They won't give up on this utopian vision.
Yeah, what just gets me is it's not just that he built such ugly buildings, okay, these concrete block monstrosities, but the unmitigated gall, like the nerve of him to criticize everything that came before and say things like cathedrals aren't beautiful, like what?
Yep.
Somebody in the chat, I have to scroll back to find it. Oh, Trey says art is not subjective. Art has an objective critique, even from the layman. I think you might be right to some extent. That would make a great topic for an episode, and
we're gonna do an art episode.
We are going to do an art episode, and probably show clips from that movie. What's it called? About beauty. Somebody in the chat help me out.
Talking about Roger Scruton's movie.
Roger Scruton's movie. Yes. Why Beauty Matters. I think that's a great documentary if you guys haven't seen that. And he talks a little bit about architecture. Okay. So after Le Corbusier, well, Le Corbusier is also responsible for what's called brutalism. Is that right?
Yeah, it may have existed, prior to him, but he's really what popularized brutalism. And so he kind of moved from the plain white boxy buildings to concrete boxy buildings later in his career. And strangely enough, it was kind of popular for a long while, unfortunately.
Should I pull up the brutalism article?
Yeah, we don't have to read
The
much of
whole
it.
thing?
Yeah, we just kind of skim through it just to give an idea of what brutalism is.
Brutalist architecture, the disappearance of beauty. And then there's this little section that's pulled out at the top of this article. And it says, even if we dismiss brutalism as a fad perpetrated by blinkered technocrats and egotistical architects, ugly buildings seem to impose an unconscious psychic tax on the great masses of people. So why have we lost the ability to construct beautiful buildings?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then there's, go ahead.
And that, architecture doesn't matter. Some people maybe don't think much about it, but it really does matter. We talk a lot about art and movies and how that shapes people's perception of things. But I do think architecture does also in a way.
It absolutely does. It absolutely affects your psyche and your mood. I mean, they've done studies that show that something as simple as the kind of stuff that comes across your feed. Facebook did this study without even telling us that they did a study on the users to see if they could affect their mood, but just by what they showed them during a day, what kinds of posts they saw. I mean, the smallest things, if fed repeatedly to us, can affect us. And if you're coming home every day to ugly surroundings, it's got to have an impact on your psychology and on your just like if you live in a prison.
Yeah.
The physical surroundings have to have an impact. It's not just that your freedom has been taken away because of something you did. It's also the physical, like the ugly, brutal surroundings around you.
Well, and that's what like a lot of communist architecture is trying to do, is trying to make people feel insignificant, that they can't compare to the might of the state. The state is all powerful and the individual is nothing.
Yeah. Okay, so this is just an article about brutalism. We'll just read a section of it here in the middle. In the United States, the major flashpoint is brutalism, a post-war style that marries imposing concrete and steel design with stripped-down functionalism. Left-wingers darkly warn of the alt-right infiltrating architecture Twitter under the guise of criticizing brutalist buildings. What?
It's just like Mad Libs. Like, alt-right supports that.
Anything beautiful that people try to defend, it seems like what?
I was just saying Nazis, yes.
Yeah. It seems like there's lefties there now to be like, hey, it's the alt-right. Just like they just attacked rosaries recently. Extremists.
How long before they start attacking doorknobs?
Doorknobs.
Happen.
Anything beautiful. Okay. Left-wingers darkly warn of the alt-right infiltrating architecture Twitter under the guise of criticizing brutalist buildings. Others defend brutalism as a symbol of our lapsed commitment to public housing and economic justice. Though brutalism is defended on both aesthetic and political grounds, the two arguments are difficult to reconcile. To a certain type of critic, brutalism represents heroic architecture, the realization of an individual designer's vision in concrete and steel. Mid-century pioneers of brutalism like Le Corbusier and Goldfinger were minor celebrities. Okay, can we also talk about the fact that Le Corbusier picked his own name? That was not his name. Yeah. and he just picked this word. It's like he was like, I'm the Madonna of, or like of architecture. I'm just gonna pick one name and put "the" in front of it.
It's good.
Okay. Le Corb and Goldfinger were minor celebrities. Le Corb's architectural vision was uncompromisingly individualistic, unmoored from tradition or conventional ideas about form and beauty. It is no accident that Howard Roark, the fictional protagonist of Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, was also an iconoclastic architect. To a few intellectuals, brutalist buildings are heroic achievements, but the public has never warmed to them. Really? You humans don't really like living in them? When Naples' notorious Gomorrah housing project was recently torn down, the loudest naysayers were professional architects. Oh, so you mean
Yep.
it's the elite? It's the elite who want these ugly monstrosities to stay up? Actual residents had long complained about the building's conditions, but if you're not willing to defend the aesthetics of brutalism, ideology will suffice. So says today's leftist journal, Jacobin, trumpeting, "Save our brutalism." Oh, and lauding the great mid-century brutalist buildings as potent symbols of our now forgotten commitment to equality. Gross.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's also funny too when I was reading about brutalism, how the architects would talk about how they're putting function over form, but the actual form of it in terms of construction was shoddy. And like the concrete that was used in brutalism did not hold up over time and started cracking and falling down. It was like you guys didn't really think about these things because you weren't really thinking about creating something that's going to last into the future. It's just like, what can I do now that's going to give me attention? It's going to give me a high fives from my fellow architects.
And meanwhile, these professional architects and these elite didn't live in these buildings.
No.
They didn't.
Some elites did like some of the modernist stuff because a lot of the working class ended up not moving into some of these buildings. A lot of the working class moved out to the suburbs, and so that left a lot of these buildings, the more nicer ones, nice, I put that in quote, up for the rich elites that would take and make it their thing, their elitist little thing.
I'm going to read one more part of this, Chris, and then we can move on.
Okay.
Defending brutalist buildings on ideological grounds only highlights the divide between design and the lived experience. I think they're using it correctly here, though, and the lived experience of a building's residents. As James C. Scott points out in Seeing Like a State, there is a profound gulf between the God's eye view of architects and policymakers and the ground level view of actual inhabitants, who have to live with brutalism's unforgiving sterility. From the air or from a distance, Oscar Niemeyer's vision of Brasilia is a striking achievement. To the city's inhabitants, however, the Le Corbusier-inspired design is artificial and alienating. Brutalism proposed to strip buildings down to their barest functions, yet it fails at the basic task of providing a welcoming, visually appealing space for residents and passersby.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like we've said, they forget the human element completely. It's almost, to compare it to the music episode that we did. We started talking about, once they started making music by algorithm and sort of removed some of the human element from that creativity, it's like they forgot the soul of music. They forgot the humanity of music. And you can see that, I think, this architecture, even though there's humans involved in creating it, until we get to this period that we're currently in now, which I was reading about, and they say the style. So after modernism came postmodernism, which we're about to get to, and after postmodernism, this one article said from 1997 to the present, we're in this period called parametricism in terms of architecture. And it says parametric design is the latest technological innovation in architecture developed with algorithmic equations to figure out.
Sign me up.
Sign me up. Okay.
Yeah.
I think they removed the soul. They removed the human element.
They it's very dehumanizing, and it says a lot about their views towards other humans, I think.
Yeah. Where did you want to go from here?
Let's jump into postmodernism.
Did you want to, before we move on, well, do you want to talk about the Bauhaus at all?
Like what I was saying earlier, Bauhaus is also responsible for state of modern architecture. They produced basically most architectural schools and design schools are modeled after the Bauhaus school in terms of the what they teach and the reverence towards certain periods of art and design. But from the Bauhaus school, Walter Gropius, who was the creator of it, he, after fleeing Germany, came to America and started teaching. Was it in Chicago? I forget. I want to say Chicago. But his ideas started influencing architecture schools. Mies van der Rohe also had a huge influence on American architecture. And that's when we started seeing these big boxy skyscrapers, like the 50s, 60s, 70s architecture, where it's literally just these steel and glass skyscrapers that are just a box. There's no variation or very little variation to it. And it's pretty much a solid color. And that, was seen, nearly everywhere. We could look at the United Nations headquarters, which Le Corbusier was one of the designers on that. So you have him to thank for that as well, the beautiful UN building. And yeah, that's basically it. We've seen a lot of damage coming from a school, and I'm not going to say like everything was bad either. That's not my point to say like everything's bad, because I do like some modern and minimalist designs, but oftentimes I think they go way too far, and like you said, they strip something that's really essential to art and to design. That human quality. You're muted.
Sorry, Tiger was barking. One of the descriptions I read of the Bauhaus school said that they were attempting to combine the functionality of modernism, of modern design, with the aesthetic of crafts and fine art and artists. And so they had like a lot of different disciplines at the school.
Yes, very holistic way of learning, and so they exposed themselves to different types of design.
Yeah, it says, here it is. They attempted to unify the principles of mass production with individual artistic vision, and they were trying to combine aesthetics with everyday function. Can I show you a little clip that I think you'll appreciate just the beginning of it?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
For many artists, architects, and historians, the Bauhaus is a symbol of modernism and artistic ingenuity. However, to the vast majority of people, the Bauhaus seems like a rather peculiar and short-lived German art school. Honestly, both views are accurate. Let's take a closer look at the Bauhaus in this video. If you'd like to see more design videos, be sure to give us a like and tell us which topics you want to learn about next. During its heyday, the Bauhaus was a cradle of modern design. The founder of the school was the modernist architect Walter Gropius. On the one hand, he had created an entirely new type of school with the Bauhaus, where students could be turned into masters. On the other, he helped to turn the Bauhaus into a kind of free-for-all experimental laboratory. School always had a unique atmosphere. As Gropius's dream of a community of designers, apprentices, and craftsmen became a reality, the school grew into a kind of commune. People from different backgrounds all lived in close proximity to one another. They worked together, partied together, and shared ideas with one another. As a result, many people viewed the school as a kind of secular cult, or even sect.
I think it's getting to the part I wanted you to hear.
For example, one of the main masters of the school, Johannes Itten, had a magnetic effect on the students. His supporters were primarily concerned with physical and spiritual cleansing. They saw their path to self-knowledge and meditation. Itten believed that in order to remove the veil of the false world and see the truth, it was
Doesn't this sound like a religion? It's a design school.
Yeah.
Okay.
necessary to prepare the body with the help of vegetarianism, exercise, fasting, and enemas.
Did you hear that? Enemas. Okay, just one more part. Okay.
At one point, the students of Itten carried out their ritualistic body cleansing in the city fountain of Weimar, which led to conflicts with the city.
Did you hear that? They gave themselves enemas in the city fountain, which led to conflicts.
And this is why Hitler chased them out.
Anyway, that's the Bauhaus school. Yeah, Kevin says it's a cult. Yes. Okay, thanks for letting us do that little departure.
But yeah, so I was thinking maybe next we can talk a little about postmodern architecture, which is a bit different from modernism, but the fundamentally, I think they're still the same.
Okay. Do you want me to bring up this article that you sent?
Yes, please. Yeah, this article has a good, I think, concise definition of it, because it's a very broad definition, and you'll see people define it differently, and the little subcategories of postmodern architecture can go all over the place, and so there's a lot of debate over what is considered postmodernism.
Okay. This is an article in a publication called In Good Taste, and it's called Postmodern Architecture, Characteristics, and Prominent Buildings. Now, I appreciated this, by the way, Mystery Chris, because I have sometimes confused modernism with postmodernism. I think because I don't really like either. But after reading through some of these, if I had to pick, I guess I would pick postmodern over modern.
Yeah, that's weird. Because I trying to figure out what the relationship was between postmodern architecture and postmodern philosophy. And I suppose there's almost a nihilism in both, but I don't think there's a lot of specific details. I guess I don't quite see the connection, but like I said, I do think it is kind of driven by this desire to almost ridicule the past, I think, and it's very kind of almost disrespectful manner, I think.
So this says postmodernism's emergence and proliferation was a direct response to the rise of art movements like modernism, a style that discouraged the use of historical reference in architecture. As modernism grew in popularity, notable structures in major cities underwent extensive renovations. This often resulted in historic buildings being demolished and replaced with stilted versions that held little regard for the artistic characterizations of surrounding buildings. In the 1960s, architects began fighting back against the demise of history and culture that they saw taking place in such areas as New York and Chicago. As explained by Denise Scott Brown and Robert Venturi in their book, Learning from Las Vegas, quote, postmodern artists created an eclectic movement that fully represented the constantly changing landscape of today's modern world. So then they're going to go through the characteristics of postmodern architecture. Did you want to read some of this?
Yeah, which part are we at? So let's see.
What is postmodern architecture?
Okay, so postmodern architecture was an international movement that focused on free-thinking design with conceptual consideration to the surrounding environment. These considerations included integrating design of adjacent buildings into new postmodern structures so that they had an element of cohesiveness while still making an impact. This careful consideration can be seen in the New Sterling by James Sterling and Michael Wilford, who fused neoclassical elements with a touch of postmodern flair. While postmodern buildings were meant to serve a function, as with modernism, postmodernism encouraged creativity and strayed from the rigid rules of modern ideals that dictated simplicity, abstraction, and simple shapes. by mixing a variety of architectural motifs and elements from the arts and crafts movement, classicism, neoclassicism, and many other architectural styles. Postmodern architecture looked to create buildings that not only honored their local history, but had a unique visual appeal as well. One of the main criticisms of postmodern architecture is that the work does not fully integrate with its surroundings, as the architects rarely design buildings to work cohesively with nearby structures. This remained a reason that many refrained from celebrating postmodern work. However, the idea of what constituted acceptable design began to shift over time. Eventually, postmodernism began to take hold, and the cosmopolitan ideals of the movement were touted as those that celebrated the future, rather than paying homage to the past. This shift in public opinion helped propel postmodernism into widespread phenomena. Muted again.
Can I show some?
Yeah, go ahead and show that.
Here. I mean, you guys will recognize, excuse me, a lot of this absurdity. But again, I almost think it's better than the modernism.
It's not drab. I can say that at least. I mean, it does kind of take some older elements and stuff, and it does it in a more playful way. But like the article was saying, they tended to do it without consideration of the buildings around it. And some postmodern buildings I can like if it's in a particular context. So like if there's a children's museum or like Walt Disney Studio, I think down in Florida has a kind of postmodernist weird triangle looking building, which still is kind of ugly, but I like how it plays on the idea of children's entertainment and things like that. So in certain contexts I can appreciate it, but a lot of times it's just put smack dab in between two tall glass and steel skyscrapers. It just sticks out like a sore thumb, which is the whole point.
Surly Unicorn, I thought you'd like this, says postmodern is what you get when Godzilla eats a buffet of buildings and vomits them back up.
It does look like that.
This is an article from Bloomberg. I picked this one because they have a lot of pictures.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just going to scroll through and take a look. I mean, this is a museum in the Netherlands. Ugly.
So like wallpaper, like birthday wallpaper.
I mean, it's just ugly. It's gross. But again, is it better than a boring concrete building? Yeah, I guess. At least there's color.
Progress.
Okay, let's scroll down. I don't mind this one so much. The Swan Hotel.
Yeah.
You like that one?
I wouldn't say I like it, but I appreciate it. I do. The big swans at the top. It kind of reminds me of that movie Toys with Robin Williams. I don't know if you ever saw that movie, but the Toy Factory is this weird kind of postmodern building. And to me, I always like the imagery of it because I think the surrealist imagery of the movie kind of fit the theme of, child innocence and the loss of innocence. The movie was terrible, don't get me wrong, but I kind of like the visuals of it.
The visuals?
Yeah.
The chat is cracking me up. No, it's shit. Awful. Wow, guys. Well, it only goes downhill from here. Should have appreciated the swans because okay. This one's kind of cool in that like a museum that you go visit.
Like a kids museum. Like you said, yeah, if it was a kids museum, like, okay, fine. But if you have to work in that every day, like, oh.
Yeah, if this were a kids museum, it was a toy factory or something, this is great. But guess what this is? Oh, it's a university. It's a college university.
Clown world there, yeah. Makes sense.
It's a business school, even.
Oh. Yeah, nothing says business like
This just looks like someone is about to hook you up to a machine and take your soul out. Like,
yeah, it's Japanese futurist. Yeah,
Japanese futuristic. Ugh, I just don't like that. Okay.
What is that?
This is an architect's dream home, okay?
It looks like that thing at the beginning of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, where he's got all these little traps
It
and
does.
the cereal. And,
Yeah. I just, again, it's like, you want to go out. So let's say you're this millionaire architect, like this guy. You want to design your dream vacation home, and you're designing the pool, and like what says like relaxation and beauty, and then you are like, how about some huge oversized children's building blocks, and like whatever that is. I no. Okay, this one's kind of cool. Look at that. This is a hotel.
It's
in
like the idea of it might be interesting because we haven't seen something like that, but in reality, you're like, it's like maybe we should have just stayed on paper or a 3D model. Do we need to actually build it in the real world?
It's sort of like you could imagine the architects maybe on drugs when they come up with it.
Yeah.
And then they said, well, it is Amsterdam, so let's do it. That's that ugly one from the beginning. This is probably the worst one I've seen in the whole bunch. Okay.
That's the other Disney one, yeah.
What do you think of this one?
Still not great. Again, I kind of like the statuary of the Seven Dwarfs. It's kind of a neat idea. I mean, it's better than what we've seen, but I think to me, it's the colors still aren't great, and I would have put more detail on the facade.
I think there's something satanic about this one. I don't. Well, this looks like a pool of blood. First of all, I just think this is where they take you when they want to make you disappear in Hollywood. Like, it just looks imposing to me, and then the fact that the statues, I know they're meant to be reminiscent of gargoyles or some type of like the Greek statues, but the fact that they're cartoon characters are the dwarves, there's something sort of creepy about that. Like it's these children's characters. I don't know.
Represents the 7 deadly sins.
I don't know. I don't like this one. Creepy. Okay, that one's kind of cool. What do you think?
Yeah, that's the worst Cracker Barrel I've ever seen.
I don't know. I kind of like it. That one's in Wisconsin.
Of course.
They said it exudes the cheerful personality of a Lego project on steroids.
Yeah.
That's how you wanted to have your home described. Still better than the projects.
Yeah, it's called the Crayola House. Interesting.
Okay, this one.
See, and that's what I mean. Like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. Like, if again, it's like we're saying, like if someone got high, it's like, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we made like a 6-story tall building that was shaped like a wicker basket, picnic basket? And like, yeah, let's build it. And it's like, the actual reality of it is like, what? It's ridiculous.
Yeah. This is moved up on the list to my least favorite.
Really? More than that weird shaped one with the wallpaper?
Yeah, more.
Oh.
Because like you said, it shouldn't have been done.
Yeah.
Like it's a joke. It's funny in joke form. But to design a whole building that's like, how funny would this be? It's going to be a picnic basket. Just, yeah. Why? That's
I will say the only good thing is that it's away from other buildings. And so it's not, overshadowing or overpowering better architecture. It's just.
Yeah, that's true. Imagine if you lived in a house like right here, right next to it.
I'd be hungry all the time.
Yeah. Every day you had to wake up and walk past that. Okay. So we're going to stop with that one now. I have a little game if there's time we can play at the end.
Okay. Do that.
but we do have a couple super chats. I didn't want to miss them. Sorry. Let's see. Trey Daniel gives us $10. Thank you, sir, and says it must be the brutalist architecture because you must be demoralized. There can be no happiness in clown world, which is why you can only laugh at decline.
Yeah.
Yep. And then he gives us another super chat. Thank you, sir. He says Romanian TV has a few good videos discussing the communist architecture on his channel. He's from Romania and his parents lived under communism.
Oh yeah, V. That's right.
You know him?
Yeah, V's cool.
I'm going to write that one down. Thank you for the recommendation. Thanks, guys. Okay. Dan likes looking at this architecture.
I mean, it's different. It's like because like when I look at a lot of it, it's like I can appreciate on one hand like how different it is, but I can still acknowledge that it's ugly.
Yeah.
It can be both to me, which is weird, but.
Adam says there's Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, and then there's that monstrosity, that picnic basket. And then somebody said, where did it go? Alan said, I would want my house to look like a sandwich. Oh, man. Okay, what did you want to do now?
Do we have time real quick to bring up the Memphis design?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit more on the interior design space, but it is under the postmodern umbrella. And I've always been fascinated with the Memphis design group because they pretty much are responsible for the 80s aesthetic.
Which
like
you love.
Bell intro, Pee-wee's Playhouse, with the squares and, triangles and all that. And so this was a group of Italian designers who I think they were listening to some Bob Dylan song that had Memphis in the title and decided to name themselves the Memphis Group. And so, again, they, like the other postmodernist architects were rebelling against modernism, and they decided to be more playful in the designs they created. And this, again, in certain contexts, I love it. Now, would I necessarily want to like work in it? Maybe not. But again, it is super 80s, and I love the 80s. I love 80s design and stuff. And so I do kind of like a lot of it, even though I may not display like some of the statues or abstract pieces that they created in my home. David Bowie was a huge collector of it. He had a huge collection of this.
Are there more photos in this one?
Yeah, there's some like that I don't like. It's like a weird looking bookshelf. But.
This is an interesting quote. Good taste was the bad thing they were fighting against. Oh, perhaps the most striking. So here we're talking about perhaps the most striking is the modernist home in Tim Burton's Beetlejuice. Oh, this is it.
Yeah. See?
Yeah.
Really inspired by the Memphis Group.
I mean, clearly I love this. I love it. But it's almost like that one that we looked at where we said this would be great for a children's museum. It's like that. This is great for Pee Wee Herman's house. I don't want a house that looks like this.
Exactly. Yeah, it's good for like a 30-minute kids show, but living and working in there, no.
I think if that were your workplace, you'd go crazy. If you
start talking to the furniture.
No wonder. Memphis design, huh? That's cool. Thank you. Thanks for showing me that.
Yeah, I just want to show that there's some postmodern stuff that's all right in certain contexts.
So I thought we could play a game.
All righty.
And let's see. There's a couple of quizzes. We'll just see. You guys can play along with us. We'll see. This one's called, Can You Guess the Style of Architecture? Now they include, maybe fun, this may not, we'll see. They include some things we haven't even talked about. So we'll just have to see how good we are at guessing. Okay, here we go. Here's the first one. I'm going to ask you, and you tell me here. What type of architecture is architecture that seeks to minimize the negative environmental impact of buildings by efficiency and moderation in the use of materials, energy, and development space and the ecosystem at large?
That's easy.
A, sustainable architecture. B, Art Deco. C, Bauhaus. D, contemporary.
It's A.
Yeah. Why won't you let me click?
Oh,
Okay. Pretty sure that's A. In its rugged and lack of concern to look comfortable or easy, which type of architecture can be seen as a reaction by a younger generation to the lightness, optimism, and frivolity of some 1930s and 1940s architecture? Contemporary architecture, brutalist architecture, streamlined modern, or structuralism?
it's kind of concerned. That probably. I might just go with probably D.
That's what I was going to say. Structuralism sounds right to me. We'll see. Okay, which architectural style emphasized curving forms, long horizontal lines, and sometimes nautical elements? Art modern, modern architecture, streamlined modern, Art Deco architecture.
I'm going to say Art Deco.
I'm going to say streamlined modern. So, because I don't think that looks like Art Deco.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't looking. Sorry, I should really look at the picture.
No.
Up.
Oh, the picture, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. If going by the picture, then I'd probably say, yeah, let's just go. It doesn't look really very streamlined though. That doesn't.
Maybe Art modern.
Yeah, let's just go with that.
Okay. Do they have the answers at the end? Is this game going to be worth it? How do we? Oh.
No.
I have a lot of boomer moments. I don't play these quiz games usually. In my defense.
Yeah.
Okay. Which architectural style is the practice of using animal forms as the inspirational basis and blueprint for architectural design? Zoomorphic, futurist, metaphoric, or contemporary?
I've only heard of a couple of those.
I mean,
I'm probably
animal forms?
Yeah, I guess that sounds like a made up term. Oh, is that right? Oh,
yes.
I swear they're making up stuff. Term zoomorphic.
Which architectural style isn't? Wait, are we gonna have time to do your Batman thing if we do this game?
I can roll through it real quick.
Okay. We'll just do one quiz. It's only 10 questions. Okay. Which architectural style is an early 20th century form of architecture born in Italy, characterized by strong chromaticism, long dynamic lines, suggesting speed, motion, urgency, and lyricism?
Futurist.
Wait a minute. Speed, motion, urgency.
Yeah. Futurists were they were straight up fascist. They're obsessed with modern technology and war. Sadly, a lot of them got exactly what they wanted, and they signed up for World War I, and many of them were killed. But they were like literal fascists.
You were right. I was wrong. Okay. Okay, and for the end, to which architecture style does Hermitage Museum belong? PWA, Modern, Baroque, Rococo, Renaissance?
It's either Baroque or Rococo. I'm trying to remember my definitions. I want to say Rococo.
Baroque.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay. Do we win money if we do well? Which architectural style is also known as Catalan modernism? Streamline modern, international style, futurist, or modernism? Me.
Guessing the last one. I don't know.
I don't know, but this is kind of beautiful.
Hmm.
I should just pick everything you say. Oh, we did this one, sustainable. And we said structuralism. Wrong.
No, that's brutalism.
I wouldn't really call that one.
I can see it.
Okay. And this one we said, what did we say? Streamline?
I think. I don't know.
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. How about 30 St. Mary Acts in London? Is this neo-futurism, modern, Art Deco, or Fauvism?
Not Fauvism. It's either neo-futurism or modern. I'm gonna go with that one. Let's go. Let's roll the dice. Yeah.
Which architecture style is a philosophy of architecture which promotes harmony between human habitation and the natural world?
I'm gonna say the last one. I don't know.
Organic? Oh, it's got to be the last one. Organic architecture. Did we win?
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Right. Yeah. I feel good.
Let's see your Batman thing, because that's what I almost forgot about that, and I was really excited to see it.
Yeah, can you make it when you pull it up? Can you make it full screen, please?
Okay.
So I just want to briefly talk about the evolution of Gotham City in the movies, because I'm a huge fan of Gotham City in the movies and all the architectural styles. And when I was a kid, I get all the books and I read about the production designers and all the influences they had. And so I just wanted to briefly talk about that because I think it's neat. So there we go. So start out with, and you can just like scroll. We don't have to like pause for each one, but that's from the first movie, came out in 1989. If you go to the next one, as you can see influence of a lot of more brutalist, a lot of Italian futurist, which I do have some pictures of later. But the designer Anton first wanted to create a city in which you could tell that it was being built on top of, like there was old architecture and they just had newer postmodern architecture built on top of that. So he looked towards a lot of futurists, both Italian and Japanese. This is some of his sketches, which are awesome. Like, I wish I could like own this like how beautiful, but you can see all the different kind of influences and like how cool looking it is as, you know, a fictional city for a superhero to, you know, live in, but not for us. This is the, I think it's called the Flugenheim Museum in the movie. This is where the Joker comes in and starts painting all the pictures while he's listening to Prince music. And, you know, he finds Vicky Vale there, and then Batman comes through the ceiling. And so this next one on the next slide, it'll show you inspiration. This is Japanese futurist, which you can tell, you can look at just how much similarities those have. These are sketches from the Italian futurist, which none of their buildings, or very few of them, were actually built. This is that 3D rendering on the next one of that. Crazy futurist. So, and then here's a brutalist building right there. You can see how depressing that is. And so then we got Batman Returns. They had a different production designer. Bo Welsh he took over for Anton first, who sadly committed suicide in 91, I believe. But this one, Bo Welsh said he was inspired by a lot of fascist architecture, Italian mostly, and other ones. But as we scroll through, we see a little bit more examples. It's from the very beginning of the movie. Penguins in the sewer. Hall of Records. He finds his details.
This looks very Art Deco here.
There was some Art Deco in all of the iterations of Gotham City. So that's the good stuff. And then in the next one, we have some giant statuary, which he took from fascist communist countries. There's the actual fascist building in Italy. Another fascist one. So we got there. That's the headquarters of the fascist party in Italy. The creepy face looking at everybody. Is that what's creepy?
What? It's just, how do you live under that, you know?
We scroll to the next one. There's some communist statuary, very expressive. You can definitely tell the influence that, you know, Gotham City would have on Returns and Batman Forever. That's Batman Forever. Barbara Ling was the production designer for that. She was inspired by a lot of Japanese futurist concepts. I think the next one is some concept art, which the concept art for this was incredible. Obviously, the movie didn't quite look like this, but I always loved this image. You have this very older, you know, early 20th century base of a building with all this future, you know, Japanese futurist architecture on top, and you had some fascist statuary in there, like in the other movies.
Are you a fan of the Japanese futurist style?
Some of the buildings, I have some of the pictures coming up. Some of them kind of interesting. Some of them I like, some I don't. Here's another image of Gotham City. And then that's a Japanese futurist building there. This is, if we go down, here's some, the one on the left, I believe, is Italian, I think fascist architecture. And then I think the one on the right is Japanese futurist. But I like the materials that they use, because I like shiny things. I'm like a cat. I like shiny things. So that was kind of neat there. And next one, we have Batman Begins. Now, Batman Begins was mostly shot in Chicago and then Pittsburgh for The Dark Knight Rises and a little bit of Manhattan. So they didn't really do a whole lot for that Gotham, but the part that was most comic booky, or most like the old movies, was the Narrows, which was like the slums of Batman Gotham City. And if you scroll to the next image, I'll show you the Narrows there. And the Narrows were inspired by the walled city of Kowloon. Kowloon, I think is how you pronounce it. If you scroll to the next one, which was in Hong Kong, I think they tore it down, but you can see how nightmarish that is. It's just stacked on top of one another. Terrifying. So depressing. We go to the next one. That's another picture of the walled city of Kowloon there. Just imagine living in that. Horrible. And then we have Batman versus Superman and Justice League, which I believe in Batman versus Superman, I think you only see Gotham City from afar. Correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but the inspiration behind Gotham City for these movies was Detroit. And if you scroll to the next one.
Also depressing city.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's all right. But if you go to the next one, I think I have an image of some concept art from Batman versus Superman. It looks like something from Detroit or Chicago there. Great art. If you go to the next one, that's an actual image of Detroit. Lovely. Very lovely. Very scary. And then we have the latest Batman film, the Robert Pattinson, The Batman. And this one was more inspired by, they used a lot of Victorian architecture, so neo-Gothic, neoclassical architecture. And they didn't really do too much to the buildings. It was more just the lighting and the atmospheric haze that created that moodiness, which I think the Gotham City in this Batman film is the closest we felt to what Tim Burton's Gotham City was like. One nice touch I did like about this Gotham City is that they had a lot of skyscrapers that were abandoned. So it was implied that there was a boom, a construction boom, and then suddenly a bust, and a lot of skyscrapers were left unfinished. And I like that touch. And if we have the next image, I think it's some concept art from James Chinland, who is the production designer. He's got a great website. If you're into concept art, I recommend looking up his website. It's fantastic, but you can see that, neo-Gothic architecture there.
I
And
love the Gothic.
mhm.
I mean, it still has that like sort of dark and brooding atmosphere, but it's completely soul sucking in the same way as some of the modernist modern inspiration and the brutalism as
Mhm.
inspiration.
Right. And next one, I have another concept art. If you see in the background, that's the Wayne Tower, which is a neo-Gothic building. But I like that. I like the touch. I really like the way they just portrayed Gotham. It was really great. That's probably the best thing about the movie, in my opinion, was the way it portrayed Gotham City. And then lastly, just have a couple of images of some neo-Gothic architecture and some neoclassical architecture. Look how beautiful that is. And then we have this.
Well, I mean, unless you're Le Corbusier, then you'd say, meh.
It should be bulldozed. Yes.
No, it's not really beautiful.
And then lastly, we have a neoclassical architecture there. So yeah, like I said, I've always loved Gotham City. I love seeing the evolution and in different styles, the way people trade it. And so it's really cool seeing that. And hopefully they continue to feature the more moody comic book style Gotham City, because the Christopher Nolan Gotham City was like, that's too normal. It doesn't feel comic book. Like I want Batman to feel like I'm watching a comic book movie. I don't want to make it like ultra realistic. I don't need to see that. Like give me a guy who wears a green suit and has question marks all over it. Give me a guy whose face is half burned, but hand stitches two suits together to make one half white and one half black. Like I want it. I don't care if it's goofy. Just give it to me. I just want to see it. I mean, if Marvel could make a talking raccoon that likes to shoot guns work, then surely DC could make Two-Face and the Riddler and Clayface work. I think you're muted.
Oh, I'm back.
There you
go. Well, a couple of people in the chat. Did you ever play this game? Did you ever play BioShock?
No, but I'm familiar with some of the art, and yeah, I love that.
It's a great game. Alan Scott says the City of Rapture in BioShock has beautiful Art Deco and Gothic style. It does. It's gorgeous. In fact, I mean, that's one of the reasons alone you should play it is for the art and the music. It's just a full immersion experience, I would say, that game.
Yeah, Art Deco is my favorite. I think I would say my favorite period in architecture. Like it's has just enough decoration to which, to me, it doesn't seem overpowering or gaudy. And so I like I said, I like shiny objects. So it has a lot of bare metal and gold and things. And I think it's beautiful. Something that's aged really well. You can still date it, but it still ages well. It's not like 60s architecture.
I'm just a little distracted because I'm hearing people talking in my house. I'm sorry.
Or do you need to go take care of business?
Can you hear them?
No.
Okay, good. We're good. I just get distracted. Sorry, guys. Rib says Art Nouveau also needs to come back.
Art Nouveau is beautiful.
Yeah. And then Adam Worrell says Art Deco just elicits flappers and vamps. Yeah. Singapore slings and good times. It does. It does. Well, cool. Well, thank you for introducing me to this subject or bringing it up and saying we should do this. And once I got into it, some of it was really interesting and funny, surprisingly. And I appreciate the walkthrough.
No problem.
Yeah.
To this, like I said, I've always loved architecture, and feeling another life, I would have been an architect. But I love learning about the background of the motivations of many of these architects. And by the way, if you're interested in the subject, there's a book, and I recently read this by Tom Wolfe, called From Bauhaus to Our House, and he talks about the ideological motivations. It's a short book. It's an older book, came out like 81. It's a little dated, but it's a good book, good read, and it's pretty funny. He got a lot of hate from it from contemporary, critics, art and architecture critics, because he also wrote one on art, and he made very similar criticisms of, the ideological bent that they had. So.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in and hanging out with us tonight. I believe Ken Lipson, I don't know if he's still here. I saw when I first posted we were doing architecture, he was like, I'll be there, but I'm not excited about it.
Don't go down
Really?
the path of Corb. Don't
Huh?
go down the path of the Corb.
Look, Corb. I love people's honesty. I thought it was funny. So I don't think he stuck around, but thank you guys who stuck it out with us to learn a little bit about architecture tonight, and hopefully you had some laughs. If it was your first time here and you like the show, please hit like and subscribe. I have an interview that came out yesterday. It was a live interview. I forgot to mention this top of the show. I got to talk with Dr. James Lindsay of New Discourses and my pastor, Bradley Helgerson, who you know from Church on the Square, about the culture war and whether or not it's a spiritual war. And I'd say go tune into that episode, even if you're not a believer, or if you think some of the most interesting comments I've gotten from that episode are like, hey, I don't usually like when you talk about religion, but I loved this episode. So if that says anything that about it, I think that's one of the best compliments, that people really enjoyed it. And it's just, I think it's a very important conversation, because they're sort of getting at, like, once, we talk a lot about woke on this channel. Once you've figured out what woke is and you've pretty much gotten a handle on it, and once you understand how to destroy it, even if we're not there yet, then there's this question of, like, what comes next, because it is a belief system, and what should come next, I guess. And so to hear an atheist and a Christian discussing that, it was just phenomenal for me to be able to sit there and, like, listen to the two of them go back and forth. And anyway, I highly recommend it. So, any final thoughts from you, Mystery Chris?
No. This was really fun. So hopefully some people who weren't familiar with it already have a more appreciation for good architecture and understand why we're seeing so much bad architecture. So hopefully, I think there's still some really good architecture out there. It's just like we're talking about music. There's still good stuff out there, but the architectural world, I think, still celebrates a lot of bad architecture. So
yeah. Do you think we'll ever get to show some of your art on this channel?
Maybe.
I would love to. I'll just put that out there. Thank you guys for hanging out with us tonight. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.